this morning I sent you an email with some pictures of leaves, but I'll still show you. So I'll do some sketching anyway. So just to show you the leaf pictures, we have a maple leaf. Oops, there it is. And a maple leaf. We have well, these are a mixture of leaves. Just to see, these are the pictures you got. You'll have, kind of just to see what colors we're going to be using. So oranges, yellows, greens, just in reds, in that range. These are the colors, and maybe browns. So here's an oak leaf. That's kind of a California oak leaf. It reminds me of. And then some of these, different fall colors. Today's the first day of September. I can't believe it. It is September already. Blows me away. So what we'll be using today is piece of watercolor paper. This one is, let's see, this one is 9 by 12, but you don't have to have that size. I just kind of wanted to go bigger today so you can see what I'm doing. I usually like to work smaller, actually. Maybe half that size. A pencil, I use a drafting pencil, and it doesn't matter what kind, but I like these because the leads come out, it's just cleaner. And you can, this is a 5 millimeter, but there's a 3, a 5, and a 7. And I really prefer those, but you can use any pencil. An eraser is good if you want to, if you need to erase, which, you might need to. And your watercolors, of course, a palette, water, and brushes. Now, I'm going to use a combination of brushes. So we've got Susan coming in. There we go. So what I have drawn here, and I'm going to explain, I don't think you can see it because it's really, I'm going to grab a piece of some typing paper so you can draw with me. This is about the same size as I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I might even trace what I had already, sort of. I can't, I wish I was. Hi, let's see, hi Susan. Nice to have you here. We're just going to start. We're doing 3 fall types of leaves, a maple, an oak leaf, and a birch type leaf. And the way we draw, and I'm just going to do this with a pen that's a little like I'm going to use a pen that's really, now this is just a felt pen, and I'm doing it so you can see the leaves. Now, of course, maybe what I should do is do this on my iPad. That'll make it really easy. I'm just going to show you, here's a little way you can sort of cheat too. Lay it on your iPad. Of course, I can't see because it's not dark, so I'm gonna have to turn it off. Let's see, when we let Susan in, I guess. All right. Oh, and Patricia came in. All right, we've got more people. Hi, Patricia. Welcome. Well, there's different ways to do it. And I mean, if we just freehand it, I'm just going to do a freehand. This might not be the prettiest thing, but I'm going to show you. The way a maple leaf would start. And if you have your reference photo, that's great. But if you look at a maple leaf, it has one long, like most leaves. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to make kind of a curve, because in nature, things aren't perfectly straight, right? We don't want it to be perfectly straight. Welcome, Susan. I'm going to mute you, but we will. There we go. Thank you. Good to have everybody here. So the way a maple leaf works is it has a little place. So I'm going to just make a little dot here. This little dot, this is where we've got we've got 5 points it's going to go off of. So this is where I'm going to make the next point go, which is right here. The next point from here. So that's 3 points. And then I'm going to do another one here and another one here. And it all comes from this place here. So then I'm going to build, I could have gone wider, but this is going to be the one I'm doing right now. And the reason I'm just doing it with felt tip so that you can see. But you can make the tips of your leaves will all end on these points. And then the little wiggly lines or the little pointy serrated edges will be in between. So I'm going to just make a point right in here. I'm just going to make kind of a serrated edge, and then I'm going to come around, and I'm going to make my point up there. I mean, this is just kind of a real loosey-goosey kind of just so you can see how the maple leaf is constructed. So that's basically, I'm just going to do the same thing, maybe a serrated edge, come up, and these are where this point is, that's where you want your tip of your leaf to be. And I'm just going to do this, and there we go. Kind of like that. That's a maple leaf, sort of, right? Now, if I did it with pencil, I could adjust, but that's not bad. And then, of course, we can make our stems a little bit thicker. So there's one. And then the second one, so that's how you would construct it. You can erase and play with it a little bit. There you go. Oh, I'm sorry, she's muted. I'm just trying to get everybody muted. There we go. Okay, good. So you guys can hear. I can hear like an echo when someone's mic is on. So, okay. So now the oak leaf. So we've got a maple, and if you want to do your leaves in different positions on your page, just turn your paper around so you're not, so it doesn't look like it's just lined up. Now for the oak leaf, that's actually the maple is the hardest. Whatever we just did is the hardest. The oak leaf, with a pencil, make kind of a curve. It's like very, very slight S curve. It's not much of a curve, but it's a little bit of one. The very top has a rounded edge. In fact, it's just make kind of it sort of rounds out at the edge. This is a stylized oak leaf. If you were to look at one in nature, it's going to have different construction, but let's just do this one. So I'm going to do kind of a round, and then I'm just going to bring it kind of a wiggly line. I'm going to do the same. This is a lot bigger. It's a bigger one than the other one. I'm going to make my stem. So you can kind of see, and then I've got at each of these squiggles, this is where my veins will end, or where they'll go. So this is that was a very simplistic oak leaf, but you can do that on your page with your pencil, of course, or something similar. And then for the birch leaf, this is even simpler. So we've got our oak, our maple, and the birch. Now the birch do the same thing, kind of a curve, just a slight curve. And then you're just going to have, it's going to be another curve starting at the top that goes kind of out and kind of another, it's not an S, but it's sort of a C, almost a C curve. And then you're going to do the same thing here. And then you just make your stem. Now these are very simplistic. You can make your lines kind of wiggly like this. And when you pencil it in, you could make them kind of wiggly like that. And then you could start your veins the same thing. Just bring your veins to kind of end where those curves arch out. So there we've got our 3 basic leaves sketched out. Mine are in pencil. They're very similar, but that's how easy they are. If you just know the kind of the construction or the way a leaf is built, then you can easily reproduce them, and you can just make them kind of like a stylized leaf. So the thing we're going to do now, and I'm going to try this brush for now. I have never used it before. It's brand new. I think I just took the starch out. I haven't really used it. Maybe too big for what I'm working with right now, but I'm going to try it. It's a Da Vinci brush, and I love Da Vinci's. Oh, Patricia's back. Here we go. Da Vinci's are just a round synthetic. Now, I'm going to just show you all in the same size range. I've got more brushes, of course, but these, I do happen to love Da Vinci's. And this is another one that I just got. Here we go. Hi, Patricia. Glad you're back. So these are number 10s. And if you look, number 10, look at all the sizes. Yeah, that's what it drives me kind of crazy about brushes. The same, it's a different brand, but they're not universal. Their number 10 is not going to be the same in each brand. So a little frustrating sometimes. I'm going to grab another one real quick out of my stash because I've got lots, of course. See how many? So many brushes, so little time. And I've got another jar full. I have a smaller brush. This is a number 8. That's a silver brand. If I can find a number 8 and another, this is a number 10. Look at this. Also a number 10. This is Princeton. So just so you know, if you hear somebody say, get a number 10 round, you just don't know exactly. But they're basically in the same range of size. I mean, they're not exact, but I've got another, this one is a 10 as well. That's a silver as well. So, the number 10 is going to give you a nice medium brush stroke. And if you get a brush that has a fine point, that's even better. Number 10 and number 8's for smaller things. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a number 10. It doesn't matter. Now I'm going to start with the lighter colors. And what you need in your palette are, start with, we have yellows. And this happens to be my core palette. It's made by Core Watercolors. And I love their colors. They're really brilliant. They don't really shift too much. They don't lighten. I really love them. But I also have my other favorite palette that I'm going to probably bring in, and that's just mixture of mostly Daniel Smith, mostly, maybe a little Winsor Newton. But these I'm going to just today. I think I'm going to just stick to this. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to close that one out, and I'm going to use this one. Put that up to this up here, and then I have a dish that I want to use to mix my colors in. But what we want to do, we'll do one leaf at a time. We'll start with the maple, we'll go to the oak, and then we'll go to the birch. And what we're going to do, and if you have a heat gun with you, great, just to make things quicker if you need to. If you don't, that's all right, because hopefully between each one we'll have time to dry. But these are fairly spontaneous. We're not going to labor over this much. I think the drawing part, and I'm hoping that I'm giving you time to draw. Someone left a chat. Let me just see. Oh, what size is your Casoneo? Did I already say that? Let's see. Here it is. That's a number 10. Casoneo da Vinci, number 10. So, in fact, all of these, I'm going to just do a number 10 challenge. I'll try each one. It'll be fun to do this just as a test, and maybe to see if you want to try a brush by just seeing how mine performs. This is a silver black velvet. I've had this a while. I did notice, if you put your brushes in water, which I don't really too much, see how the lacquer cracks off of the wooden barrel? And that's just a bummer that happened. I normally don't leave brushes soaking in water, but for some reason this came off, and it can happen. And I don't think that I've ever had it happen to a Princeton or a Da Vinci, but I do have it happen often on these. And it could just be their process, but it's still a great brush. So I'm going to start with this one, the silver black velvet, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some, I can wet it a little bit, but I don't think I'm going to. I'm going to start with some yellow. And I'm going to pick this yellow, and this is called Nickel Azo. I think that's a pretty color, or some Indian yellow. I can use both. I'm going to just mix up a little bit of color in my palette. I'm just going to give myself a lot of yellow here. And maybe I should just mix the palette ahead of time. This might be good because we're working on 3 fall-inspired leaves. So maybe get some in your palette or on your whatever you're using. Mix up some nice yellow, and then go to a beautiful, maybe an orangey, transparent orange color. You don't want a real opaque color in any of these, because I think you're going to be happy if you have if you're using transparent colors, because we are going to have colors blend together just on the paper. So here's a transparent pyrrole orange. I see that I use it a lot because it's almost empty. And it's a beautiful color. Daniel Smith makes also the same kind, the same pigment. I'm going to also use an alizarin crimson. I think that would be pretty cool. It's a nice red. If you go to like an opaque red, I think you will be, if you remember our tomato adventure, that reds are really, a lot of reds that you're using in your watercolors can be opaque, like a cadmium red, or there's pyrrole red, different reds. You will know in your tray. And I'll just give you a little peek here. Yeah, I can see these really gorgeous reds, and these reds, you can see the red in the tray. That is telling me it's not transparent. All of these reds are really pretty, but they're not going to be transparent, most likely. They're just, especially this one right here, and I think that's pyrrole red. So you're looking for transparent colors, and they're always really dark in your palette. They look almost black, and those are going to be your transparent colors. So that is just a little, I think we've talked about it before, but it's probably good to just remind ourselves about that, because it really makes a difference in how your watercolors come out. I'm also picking a beautiful, this one's called quinacridone gold, and it's a gorgeous color made in all brands. And I'm going to also pick a green, some kind of, this one I'm going to say that's a sap green. Sap green is beautiful, but it is staining, so beware of that. But it is a beautiful green, and each brand makes their own green. Sap greens look different. in each brand. It's just like brushes, they're not standardized, even though the pigments are, pigments they use are definitely, but I think the naming, how they name them and everything, it just isn't the same. So I might just throw a little quinacridone magenta. And the reason I'm using that is because magenta with yellow makes a gorgeous red. So I'm going to just do that. And then those two can be together. That would be really nice. So what we're going to do is layer stuff. We'll start with light colors first, and then we'll just try different things on the different leaves. So I've got kind of a nice little mix of reds and yellows and my green. I'm trying to limit my palette just a little bit. And I'm going to start with, on this maple, I'm going to start in the maple. Doesn't have a lot of yellow, but let's start with yellow anyway. And just kind of do a little layer and go kind of wet and just create a yellow layer inside your leaves, in your leaf shape, whatever that is. If it's big, mine's kind of big, so I've got to work kind of fast because I don't want it to dry. So you got to keep, if you're working in a large area, always keep it wet. Just keep adding the water and the color to it so that it stays wet inside your shape. In this case, we are going to do some splotchy kind of stuff. So just work fast and then keep it wet. So just kind of keep an eye on it as you're working along and try not to let your areas dry. And if you see that they may dry, just go back in and give them a little water. So I'm just doing this with color. Of course, I've got the yellow. I've got that yellow I first started with, which is the nickel azo yellow, I think. That's it. You could use any yellow. And I'm just going to keep working. And it's basically kind of an even wash inside the shape of my maple leaf. And this one's going to be the most difficult because it has more little points. It has little areas that there's a lot more valleys and mountains here on the drawing. But you'll be able to see the shape of my leaf once I put it together. Keep it wet though, so like I'm going to go back where I see some places that look like they may want to dry. I'm just going to go right back to it. And I'm going to do this, keep working it. And if you have paper that's stretched, that's great. If you don't, it will buckle, but you can always straighten it out afterwards, basically. So I've got some here, got my brush. This one doesn't make the nicest point. It's okay, but you can make those nice points with the tip of your brush, and on the barrel or the body of the brush, this is the body, this part here, you can lay it down and you can get wider strokes that way. So your brushes, and there's three things I always think about watercolor, three things. Your paper, and this is also the same with sumi painting. You have your paper, that's really important. Your color and your brush. Those three, you want to get the best. Now I'm going back here to dampen that to make sure it's wet. Just want to make sure your three components, you just want to give them the most, make sure that I think the watercolors are the least worry. You want to spend your money on a brush and paper, good paper, and the watercolors aren't as critical. So now I've got a wet, I want to just drop in some orange. Now I've got this orange color, that pyrrole orange, and I'm just going to drop it in on the tips, right on the ends of my leaves, just on the tips while it's still wet, and it's blending beautifully into the. And I'm not really brushing it. I'm actually just dropping it. I'm kind of letting the watercolor do its thing, letting it it's going to dance inside the water and spread the way it wants to. And of course, all watercolors don't spread evenly or equally. Some are more aggressive spreaders than others, but this one is a pretty good one. This one's doing just fine. Some are more passive, or they don't push out. So it's amazing. It's kind of fun to watch. Now I've done that, and I'm going to also take a different orange, and I'm going to just drop it. I should look at my maple leaves. I'm going to take a look at a picture And this is not a really good picture of a maple leaf. I'm going to just take, and I see there's all kinds of ways that this can happen. You can see there's some that still have green, some that can have more deeper colors. So in this one, I think it'd be fun to just keep dropping some color in, maybe in the center, right in this spot. Let that, I'm dropping, this is a little bit of that alizarin crimson. I'm just dropping it right in this base, and I'm going to see what happens. Let it just go. Now that I may at this point add some green just for fun, or I may leave it alone. Sometimes it's good to leave it alone. But I'll just do some green just to see. I might as well try just a little bit of sap green on the tips, very, very tip, and see if anything happens. Oh yeah, that's kind of nice. And it could kind of look brownish, but that's okay because that's what leaves, can look. I'm just sticking it. I'm just going to drop it right on the ends. And right on the tips, just on those little tiny tips of the leaf, of the points there, just right on that. So drop just like, you're not brushing, you're just placing the paint on the ends. I like that. I think that's fun. Of course, it'll be different when it dries. So, go ahead and be more bold in more, it's going to be much paler. Of course, the core watercolors are naturally not that pale, so we'll see how it dries. Just going to keep doing it on those little tips, that green, and I like that. I think that's fun on all of the tips. That kind of gives it more dimension, too. And I could draw out those points a little bit if I want with my brush. Okay, so now I'm going to also, I'm going to take this, while everything's still wet, I'm going to make my stem, kind of build my stem here with the green. And then I let some of that green go into the leaf, which makes it look even more interesting. So that I'm going to let marinate. I'm seeing a lot of this is really kind of pretty, but it might look different when it dries. But if I wanted to, I'll just show you. If I wanted to start bringing out the veins a little bit, I could wipe my brush dry, clean, and then I could just draw it out. But I'm not sure I'll like it, but I'm going to try. Just kind of drawing those. I like that. So I'm just taking where my pencil line, I'm just kind of drawing with a dry brush, wiping it off in between. And that gives me a little bit of just a little bit. I'm going to leave it because I think, there we are. Just needs to be left alone. I think it's really fun just like that. So now let's go to our oak leaf, and I'm going to try a different brush. So that one was that one. And this one is that Casaneo. And it's got a different combination of hairs. It feels like it's a little stiffer than the silver. And we'll see what happens. So the oak leaf. Now the oak leaf, especially if it's got more green in it, I can see. More brown and green. But we can still use these same colors. We don't have to create a brown, because we can make a brown with these colors that we have. But if we wanted to add a brown, by all means, we've got brown here. Burnt sienna would be good. I'll just throw some in there. I'm going to replace my burnt sienna with that transparent pyro orange. Is so pretty, but I'm going to not use it in the oak leaf because it's such a intense color, which I love for the maple leaf. So let's do instead of yellow, let's do like a light. Let's see what we could use. I think a burnt sienna color would be really nice. Just a nice wash of burnt sienna. And this is a different brush. I'm going to see how it works. Same thing. I'm going to go in wow, this holds a lot of water. Wow. This is more of a very it's not as orangey. It's more of just a subtle brown. I'm going inside the leaf shape. And like I did with the maple, I want to keep it wet. Just got to keep that nice and wet. And I might even just bring the stem out now. And this does hold so much liquid. It's really nice. It's not for detail work. I can see. I'm glad I did the choice. I'm glad I used the silver brush for the maple leaf to get these points, because I'm not going to be able to do that with this Casaneo brush. It's more for wider wet washes, but not really built for super. I don't see I can get it to a fine 1-point tip or anything. So I'll have to use a different brush to detail with this. I like it though. It's just a different, totally different. So it's good for these curved edges. And I still want to keep my everything wet. So just make sure as you're building your first layer. This is a wet into wet we're doing, by the way, on these so far. And then we'll do another layer, of course, to get more detail for the leaves. But we're starting out with our first layer is a nice wet and wet wash with with multiple colors. So now I've got that. That's the shape I wanted. Oh, there we go. And now I'm going to drop some green. Right now, I'm going to drop it in just in one part of the leaf, kind of following what I saw in the photo. I'm just going to drop that, maybe bring it down, and I'm going to let that green spread. And that is a really good spreading green, which is nice. It does what I want it to do. And because my brush is not giving me a nice point, it's a little more of a challenge. I'm going to stick with it. I'm not changing brushes. I'm going to do, I could kind of see it's really intense in one area. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in and let it just move around. And then I might put some up here. Maybe, and keep it the dark parts on the tips, and that really will help give it dimension. In fact, I'll do that on all tips, all of these little round edges, curved edges. So I've got that. I think I'm just going to leave that one like that. I could add some orange now. Just pop in some orange. I'm just going to drop it in like boom, boom, just spots, and just see what happens with that. Kind of random spots just to build. Maybe that's too bright, but I do think it's pretty, so I love that orange. I think I'll stay away from the yellow and maybe add some more of the green, because that green really is going to help. It's that sap green. It's going to be really nice. I think that's going to keep that oak look. Just dropping it in, not brushing it. So let that sit for a little bit. Now I'm going to do the birch. So the birch, what do we have here on the birch? We have lots of yellow, lots of similar colors. So we're going to start, I'm going to change brushes. I'm going to use a different brush. Let's see which one. This time I'm going to use this one I love. This is the Da Vinci Petit Gris Pur, which another one I love. This is another one I use a lot. It's the same type of hair. And this one has the little wrapped, it's wrapped. And it's kind of, I don't know if this is really squirrel, but I think that's what it's supposed to simulate. It could be a squirrel hair brush, but I don't think so, because it didn't cost that much. So, but what you'll notice when you try a brush out, especially when you're just going to an art supply store and you want to try a brush out, you should always have just clear, or if they don't let you, but sometimes stores won't let you do it, but some do. One thing that you're looking for, you wet your brush and you want to look for a brush that it holds lots of water, but see that point on that one? That one has got a fabulous, almost, and if I could show you close up, I don't think I can, but it comes to practically a 1 hair point. It is a very nice point. This one, the one I used before, this one, I'm going to show you the difference. I can't get it to that same point, so you can see the difference. So this is going to be the brush that I'll always go to. This one I'll use occasionally, I guess, for some, like this was fine. But this is, sometimes you'll learn, live and learn, but this is really a gorgeous brush, the way it's shaped and the way it comes to that beautiful point. And that's what I look for every time I'm looking at a brush. But you can't tell. You can tell a little bit when you look at them in the store, because they have the starch on them, but sometimes it doesn't always come back to that point after you've taken the starch out. So, once you've got to get that starch out, and then you can tell. This has got a nice point too. So that's what I always look for. So this one, let's do our birch leaf, and we'll start it with a yellow. Again, another yellow. And this brush holds so much water. It's like soaks it up like a sponge. It's crazy. So to start with your brush with the layer and do the same thing. Just bring that yellow color throughout the whole entire leaf. Now this one has some serrated edge, kind of a curvy shape. So I'm just trying to get that all in, get that wet onto wet, keep that area, keep everything nice and wet. This hair is much softer than the hairs on the brushes I was using before. So it's going to give me a completely different experience. But I do like that I can get a nice fine point just by turning it, and I can get this pretty thin line, which I could not get with the other one. So I'm there, Cheryl, I'm thankful that you mentioned this, because I sometimes will just go along and I kind of assume that everybody knows or has tried all these brushes, and I don't think that's the case, because so I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I'm going to be more mindful and make sure that I'll be more descriptive on what I'm using so that you can decide for yourselves what you want to do. So now I've got a nice wet color here, and I'm seeing in the birch there's some really dark black spots, really dark, not black, but they're really dark. So I'm going to try to figure out how to do that. But I think what I'll do first, though, is I'll put a layer of the orange, or not layer, but I'll just drop in some orange kind of on the tips, just like I did in all the other ones. Just kind of get those tips kind of burnt, or they're getting crispy, they're starting to get, it's fall. They're going to fall on the ground, or they already have fallen on the ground. And I see that this orange just sort of has a interesting spread. And what I could do to soften that a little is to take it and just, while it's still wet, just kind of soften that spread a little, because it is just a little much. But you can control. You have a lot of control, more than you think. As long as you know the characteristic of the color, you'll know. There's another little thing you can do too. If you take your brush, take all of the water out, just get it all out, and then you can use your brush as a straw, and it kind of lifts. It will lift color up. It will take puddles out if you have puddles, and you can do that. Just get that out, and you can just soften it if you want, and I think that's better. And now I'm going to look at my birch leaves again, and I see lots of dark spots. I do see some greens, so I'm going to use that same sap green color. Maybe I'll add another green just for fun. I'm going to add a little, let's see, this is Viridian, just a little Viridian to kind of give it a little more of a cooler tone, slightly cooler than the sap green. I'm going to mix the two, actually. And now I'm going to just put them in places. And I actually I'm just do it a little bit on the tip, just like, and then we'll go in on another layer, though, of course, after we're done. And I'm going to go in the center, right in the middle, and see what happens. Like that. And maybe on some of the veins, just kind of pop it in, see how it, maybe just an uneven amount here. And then I'll take that same green, and put it down in the stem. We're going to just see, I think I'll do another thing is this really dark color. And I'm looking at my palette. How can I make that dark color with my limited palette? It looks like what I could do is mix some Payne's Gray, which is a really dark, almost blue-black. I'm going to mix some Payne's Gray. I'm going to show you right here. There's my Payne's Gray. And then I'm going to mix some of that magenta, because I think that will really almost be a purple, actually. And I'm just going to be bold, and while it's still wet, I'm going to just drop them in, and just drop it in spots, because that's kind of what I'm seeing in the picture. And it might spread farther than I want it to, but that's okay. And then maybe on the tips too. So that the Payne's Gray mixed with that magenta it's making a really interesting spotted thing here. And I like that in the leaf. I'm going to take it down to the leaf and give it lots of spots. There we are. And then I'm just going to go to the edges a little bit with that color because I really think that's nice. And I could mix that color with some green. See what happens? That sap green. Oh yeah. You mix that with the sap green and you get this gorgeously dark, really neat green. And I'm just going to put that also on the edge of my birch. And everything's still wet, working wet into wet. We're still working wet into wet. There we go. And just
what color is that, Karen, that you're using, that final color?
That color is a combination of Payne's Gray and quinacridone magenta and sap green. Kind of turned into this really gorgeous browny green color. And you just mix it in your palette until you get to the color that you're looking for. So I'm just gonna wait. I gotta wait for this to dry before I do another round of that. But that I really like that. I think that's gonna be fun. Just keep putting those little spots in, and as it dries or evaporates, then my spots will get smaller, which is what I'm looking for. I could take my heat gun to sort of show you a quick way. Right now this is really wet, so I'm just gonna heat it a little bit. I don't want it to be completely dry. I just want it to be less wet. I want it to be just slightly. You still want it moist, but I don't want it completely dry. So I'm going to show you when you drop in a color in an area see how it's going to spread a little bit less so I can get those dots a little smaller. It still spreads because it's not completely dry. I'm going to do it again, show you. I'm just going to find some areas that I want to get some smaller dots in. And if it's dry, of course, it won't spread at all. But because I still have a little moistness, it's going to still spread, but not as much. So you've got some variations going on in there, which is really fun. Now that dried completely. That dried completely. So I'll just take that out because I don't want that. And I can just go in the areas and pop in that so that gives it more that natural look I'm looking for. And if it's not spreading, that means it dried completely. But so you can see how fun that is. You can control the amount of your spreading by the amount of dryness. Now, here it didn't spread at all, so just lift that up and get it out of there. And to get the more intense colors, just keep putting the color in. Just keep dropping colors in. So there, I've got my little birch started. Now we can go to our second layer in our maple. Okay, so that brush, it was fun to use. It's very, very soft though. Now the next brush I haven't tried yet is this is called an Escoda Versatil. It's from Spain. They're not as expensive, but they're good for detail, I think. Number 10, just the same. So let's look at our maples, our maple pictures, if we have our maple. And this will be a fun one to do, is to start building the veins a little bit. Like, let's do some orange. I think it would be really fun. And this may be too big of a brush. I'm going to check the point. It's got a nice point. It may be not, it might be, I'll try it, but I might like to use a smaller brush to make the fine lines for the veins. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to just take maybe this dark, or I'm taking my alizarin crimson and I'm going to mix it with that orange, that transparent pyro orange that I have. I'm just going to make some veins, and I may just do a touch of, very little of this Payne's Gray purpley mixture, just to darken it a hair. There, so I got a nice burnt orange, but it's not really dark. And now I'm going to just go in and work. I see my little veins that I've drawn pictures of, and then if you look too, you can see just how the veins of these work. When you look at a photo, and I'm kind of using this one as a reference, this one here. If you look closely, you can see the red, that dark red kind of color, and then they just kind of go off each other. So I think that's really cool. I'm just going to kind of remember that, and I'm going to start my vein thing. And everything should start from this point here, and that will give it more of a realistic, because it's much more intense down in this area. So I'm going to start here, and I'm hoping I can get a nice thin line, which I really can't. So I'm just going to go ahead, and because I can't get a thin line, I'm going to start this here. I don't think you can see that, but you can see what I just did. I'm going to change the brush because this will not, it's not going to work. So I got to have my 5 little points here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's only 4. Why am I only seeing 4? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's 5. My brain just was seeing 4. So I'm going to put that down, and I'm going to use a brush that I know can make a fine point. You can get a small brush, a little round brush like this one, little, just the same, just a nice little brush that gives you fine lines. Whatever you're going to use, but something that lets you make a nice fine line. So this is my little number 0 Da Vinci. It's the same hair as I used on this brush here, or on the birch leaf. So now I'm going to just make my leaf, and I'm getting a nice fine line. And I certainly didn't add enough color, so it was too dry. So I'm just going to go ahead and get a nice red-orange color. And I'm just going to take it from the center and move up to that point. And then I'll just bring some veins, kind of like to just follow. And these still aren't thin enough. So this brush, I still need a thinner brush. So what I'll do is take even a thinner brush that I know is going to work. This is a number 2. It doesn't have as much water capacity, but it'll give me a nice fine line. This one, the number 4, this might work too. So I'm going to try that one. Yeah, that one's a nice one. This is a liner brush, so it's got a much longer, it holds a lot more water or color, and it gives you a nice long, lots of, point. You get a nice point, and there we go. So now I'm going to try it up this one and see what happens. So I'm going to give my brush, that one gives me a lot more control. And now I can just make my little veins kind of going off. You could be as detailed or as not detailed as you want. I'm just trying different things just to give that detail, or the feeling of this leaf. It could have been, you could just not have the veins, but I think that veins are kind of important with these, especially with the maple, probably not the other ones. I'm just going to find these, and I'm going to rotate my paper, which is really handy when you're making lines. Instead of trying to go, it's easier just to draw them down. So this is what I'm going to do is starting it from that center point, which is still wet, and I'm just going to bring it to the tip of my leaf tip here, and then I'm just going to do the same, bring some veins, and yes, I'm getting nice fine lines like I like. So I'm going to do the same on this. I'm going to just come from that place in the center, and then it gets darker, which is what you're looking for. There we go. I'm just bringing these veins. All the veins kind of end up on those little tips of the ends here of the leaf sections. I'm just going to try to do that on all of these, and just making them because it's kind of the growth pattern. So if it's very relaxing. If you think this is just basically, you just follow the pattern, and look at leaves and observe them, and you'll kind of see why nature, why this is happening. It's just interesting. So these veins are leading or feeding the leaf tips, and that's kind of where it gets its nourishment, the water and the nourishment and the vitamins and all that stuff, kind of like us. And it's kind of wonderful to just see that and observe it, and just realize it's just amazing. It makes it just so amazed with life and nature. It's just it's crazy. So I'm going to just go ahead and bring that vein up and keep coming from the center, and then I can take it down and just enhance that stem a little bit, darken it. And I'm going to take my vein up to this part, and then I'm just going to find those little tips where the veins are leading to, and then just make that happen. So that is the maple. Now we could add another layer, but I think this one I'm happy with. I think I could add, if I look at my maple leaf a little more carefully, it looks pretty much like that. So just going to leave that alone. I could extend this vein a little bit here. That one was with the brush that it just wasn't giving me a nice thin line. So now I've got those, and I think that's done. I could line this a little bit. If I wanted to enhance the edges a little, I could do some shadowing just a little, and I'll kind of do this very carefully. I'm going to mix some of that purpley color with my red or orange, and I could maybe in just some parts of this maple leaf, I don't really want to overline it, because if you do, then it just kind of looks fake, you know. You don't want to overdo it, but I'm going to just kind of do a little line here, and I don't know about that, but I'll just do it anyway. This is actually just coming out from the stem, so it's actually probably not a bad thing. I'm doing just kind of enhancing this edge just a little bit with a darker color, but not too much of a difference. I'm going to leave that like that, and just leave it. And I could do this with other areas, so if I wanted to, like I could just, you know, just little bits of areas, but that looks too contrived, so I'm going to dab it up. And you can do the same. You can do that everywhere. If you find that you don't like a part, just lift it off. So there, I like my leaf there. I'll let it go. Leave it alone. Now the next one we're going to work on is our oak, and with the same thing, we're just going to build. I'm going to turn mine around so I can show you this here. Now I'm just going to build. I'm going to use a green, sap green. I use my nice liner brush, a really dark color this time. I think it just needs to be a nice green, maybe with a little yellow. Mix it with some of that yellow that I already have, because we're doing our second layer. So, and maybe darker, really just try to get it really dark. And I could add some of that Payne's gray just to darken it even more. Ooh, that's really dark. I overdid it. So I'm going to just add some more green and put it in a different tray. There we go. Can always add more water if I want. So I'm going to just take my, just going to start at the stem of this oak leaf. I'm going to darken it, and then I'm just going to draw the leaf or draw the vein up to the top. And that's the first one. And then I'll just, while it's still wet, I could go a little lighter than that, I think, but you know, I'm going to look at it carefully, and I see how they are. They just kind of go out like this, and the tip basically, just like the other one, you're really just building you're making the veins go towards each of these rounded tips. However it works. There we go, like this. And these could be straight or curved. It's up to you. It's kind of, you know, this is a stylized leaf. These are not like totally realistic by any means, but they're fun. They're stylized. So I'm going to just let that sit for a minute, or I could do more little offshoots, like little tiny veins that come out of these. I'm going to rotate my drawing a little bit and just work it out from here. It's a little easier to control if I just go up like that. So you can do little tiny branches from those veins, but they should be thinner, much thinner as you go up and out. I've got little tiny branches here. These are kind of thick. That's what happens sometimes. I'll do another thing too that's a little bit more fun. I'll just get these little tiny branches, kind of so that every single leaf has something. Since I've started it, I might as well finish. That. There we go. So I got that. Kind of looks like a little tree, doesn't it? So I could take the whole leaf and make a division, like do something, and I'll wait for that to dry a little before I do. I think I'll just show you what I'll do. I'm going to dry this a little bit because I see a little water down here. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to dry it there. Now, so the next, just to make it so that I'm going to do a little glazing over this. And I'm just going to take this brush here, the same one I was using. I kind of like this one, this Princeton here. I'm going to just do a little glaze on one side of the leaf, just to give it kind of like that. It's just a little variation, just to show you can glaze over what you've done. So I'm going to do a little mixture of that greeny purple color, but really light. I don't want to overdo it. It's like dark greenish color. I want to be really pale, so I'm not going to get too much. And maybe a touch of this nice yellowy color, kind of a, I don't know, it's like a, looks like an olive green almost. I don't want to make it very dark though. So I'm just going to do a little glaze on half of this leaf. And I'm going to start up at the top, and I'm going to just go on the side of the leaf. And I'm just going to do it all through here. And this is very, very pale, mostly water. It's just got a little bit of this green color in it. And this is, once again, I'm going to do another wet wash, but since it's a glaze. That's what a glaze is, when a color dries, when you're doing a watercolor over another color. So a dried color, not a wet color. This is dry, so it's called this. We are now glazing. And I'm just, so you can see the dark, it kind of helps, it adds a little depth or dimension to the three-dimensionality to this leaf. And now that I've done that.
If they're still wet, we should wait and do our glazing after the picture's dry, right?
Yes,
Okay.
if you, unless you have a dryer, yeah, just, you always want to wait. So I've got this glaze, and now I'm going to add, because we're artists, we can do what we want. I'm going to add a little bit of this magenta. I know it sounds weird, but I'm going to do a little magenta in, and that's just going to go right in that wet into that glaze on that side. I'm just dropping a little bit of this magenta color, but you could use any color. You can use another green, but I'm just doing it because I can. And so it just it made it more deep, and it gave it some dimension a little bit more. So that'll look really beautiful when it's dry, I think. And it's subtle, but it's really there, it really makes a difference. So that you can glaze like that. Now let's see, we'll go back to our birch. And I'm going to observe the birch leaves and see what I can do to detail this a little bit. So I see the birch leaves. So the same thing, let's draw some veins. And this time I'm really going to just take the color, that burgundy color, or that purpley burgundy color, whatever that is. It's kind of all very much all kind of together now. And I'm going to just draw the veins. And I sort of see pencil lines. And move these out of the way. All those brushes are in my way. All right, there we go. I see some pencil lines that I've drawn, but I don't have to follow those. They're barely visible. I do want it to be dark, so I'm going to combine a lot of these colors and just get a nice dark color. And I'm just going to go at the base of the leaf, right at where the stem starts, and I'm just going to bring it up. And of course, I don't want to run into that, so I'm just going to, here, I'll go this way. I don't want to put my hand on this that's still drying. So I'm just going to take it up to the top of the leaf, here, all the way to the tip. So now I've just created that. Okay, we've got that growth pattern happening. And now I'll do the same. In this one, really, it's probably the same structure as the others, but they're more subtle. So I'll just start while it's still wet, I'll just go in and start on one side and kind of go up with a slight curve on one side of the leaf, and then I'll do it on the other side. And it's really good just to rotate if you're more comfortable making a line in one direction, it's just better to rotate your picture, rotate it. So I'm going to do the same here. And just making my little veins going up. Here we are. So that's my birch. Now I could take this and maybe deepen this a little bit and sort of widen that and maybe create some kind of thicker, and it's still wet kind of, so that's good. I'm actually just kind of going in and burying the width of the vein in the center, and that gives it it looks just a little bit more natural, kind of thickens. I'm just thickening those lines in there. It's something I've already started, but I'm just kind of going over and reinforcing and thickening just at that base part. And I think I like that better. It needed that. And you can just always reinforce, lines like this. So it's just that, I think once it dries out, I'll be happier with that, the way it is. Now this one I can glaze, well, but I have to wait. But I don't know if I need to. Right now it's a couple of minutes before noon, before 1, or whatever time it is in your time of the world. So at this time, I'd say these leaves are pretty finished. We can always detail, but we don't want to labor over anything. There's things we could do with this. If we wanted to add light, you could use a white marker. If you wanted to make a shadow, like let's say you wanted to make, and I'm just going to quickly, we'll leave these as is, but if I don't want it floating on the paper and I wanted a shadow, I could do a purple tone underneath around the side. But I'm going to leave that. I'm just going to leave it because my intention on these is I want to cut them out and put them in a collage. But this is our leaves. We could also glaze. You can glaze. I think with the maple you wouldn't need to, but if you wanted to add more, just like what I did here, I just darkened it with a little glaze. And I would love I'd like to see what you're all doing. So there are the leaves, and I think they kind of came out okay. And I'd love to see what your leaves are looking like.